Welcome to the Simple Study. We are the Simple Students, and we are simply reading and talking about the Bible. Today, we are reading John chapter 9.
Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with his saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, Go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated, sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Therefore the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, Is not this he who sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He is like him. He said, I am he. Therefore they said to him, How were your eyes opened? He answered and said, A man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and I received sight. Then they said to him, Where is he? He said, I do not know. They brought him who formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. He said to them, He put clay on my eyes and washed, and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath. Others said, How can a man who is a sinner do such things? And there was a division among them. They said to the blind man again, What do you say about him because he opened your eyes? He said, He is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight, until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. And then they asked them, saying, Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How does he see? His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees we do not know, or who opened his eyes we do not know. He is of age. Ask him. He will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, He is of age. Ask him. So they again called the man who was blind and said to him, Give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he is a sinner or not I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. Then they said to him again, What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from. The man answered and said to them, Why, this is a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, You were completely born in sins, and you are teaching us? And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said to him, Do you believe in the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? And Jesus said to him, You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking to you. Then he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. And Jesus said, For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, Are we blind also? And Jesus said to them, If you were blind, you would have no sin, but now you say we see. Therefore your sin remains. Amen.
Where do you even begin with this chapter?
I almost laughed when the Pharisees are giving the blind guy such a hard time, and he's giving it right back to him.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. This is pretty much, as we've seen in the last few chapters, we have the Pharisees refusing to accept Jesus. Only this time, instead of arguing with Jesus, they argue with the man that Jesus healed. But it really does show, and I'm glad that we have this story, because it really shows just how lost the Pharisees were and how easy it is to grasp who Jesus was, that a blind man could do it. In theory, this blind guy doesn't know anything. Back then, literally all this guy did was get led to wherever he would beg, and he would beg for money. I don't think, maybe he would go to the temple and the synagogue, but so it's hard to know for sure. There's so much contrast here. We see so much how the Pharisees really saw people. And again, we see their heart revealed in that they are trying to find any way to condemn Jesus through his actions rather than celebrate the miracles.
It almost seems like it's the exact same. It's a different retelling of the story of the woman at the pool, where everybody's just, not believing her. I know that's not completely accurate. But as far as the Pharisees are concerned, I'm just going to restate what you just said. They're just anything they can say. Interestingly, though, they do say they're divided. So some of them are standing there and they have to be going, wait a minute, this is not, there's got to be something here.
Well, many Jews believed in Christ. It's easy to forget because so many of the stories focus on the Jews who tried to kill him. But even, was it last chapter, 2 chapters ago, we talked about Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee. Paul, arguably one of the greatest Pharisees, becomes a Christian. So there are a lot of conversions, but there's also a lot of non-conversions.
It's also interesting to note in this culture that people that had these types of disabilities were often referred to as there was a reason for it, or their family did something wrong and it was some type of a curse, or they earned it or deserved it.
You always want to, I think that's very natural. I think we even do this today. Something bad happened. Surely that happened because I did something. And that's really what Christ is saying. He's not saying neither this man nor his parents sinned. Yes, they did. We're all sinners. That's the core message. That's not what Jesus is saying. What he's saying is not everything happens because of some specific action. We're all sinners, yes. This world is awful. And it is that way, and because of that, bad things will happen. Yes, but it's not this tit-for-tat thing, and that's where we lose our sight. We forget just, even if we lived as perfectly as we can, because we can't be perfect, because we are in a broken world, we are suffering the consequences of sin, and we need to be mindful of that. We need to be mindful of the state of the world that we're in, and when people forget that, that's when you do start doing this. Well, oh, something bad happened to you. You must have done something wrong. And I've even heard that where people will get twisted. Oh, this guy died of cancer. He must not have had strong enough faith. He would have been healed if his faith was stronger. And that's such a twisted, wrong way to look at the world. The correct way is, this is a broken world, made broken by our sin, and now we're seeing the Redeemer come to make it right. And like Jesus said, but that the work of God should be revealed in him. Now, that's not Jesus. Again, that's not Jesus saying, yes, God secretly chose and smote this guy at an early age to make his life miserable just for this moment.
But he's also not saying that sin and bad things happening to you are not connected, because they are and can be. If I go out and strike my brother in the head, that's a sin, and I go to jail. Or I lose my family, or bad things happen to me. And Jesus is not refuting that at all, because that's exactly what you just said. We live in a sinful world, and bad things happen because of the sin. What he's not saying is just because something bad happened to you, it has not necessarily...
You can't tie it to a specific action or decision. Right. Yeah, human reactions to our sins, I think that's a totally different category.
And we're judgmental. So we look for a thing. Got to be something we did wrong.
Well, and we want that too. I think we want it because then you can at least make it make sense, even in those twisted, like cancer. Oh, I have cancer. Or, okay, let's rephrase that. You have cancer. Oh, well, I didn't get cancer because, I wonder what messed up stuff he did to get cancer. Thank God I'm so righteous and that I don't have cancer.
Another thing, if you want to touch on it or not, is the fact that Jesus does make a statement about it being day. And because it's day, I can still do some stuff. It's not night yet. As long as it is day, Jesus meant as long as he was still on earth. So
what verse are you referring to?
You are in right here, 4. It must be the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. I think there's a bit of a metaphor there.
Gotcha, yes. So the way I read it, and I know you have the study Bible, so maybe you can add some context, but kind of the way I see it is exactly that. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. So essentially, because it says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And so when Jesus dies, that's kind of darkness. And even when he does get crucified, darkness falls over the earth. Now, I'm sure, I don't know enough about this, so I don't know that we want to jump into it, but I'm sure that some people will use that as justification for cessation, which is this idea that God doesn't like do miracles anymore and the spirit's not alive anymore because it's, the night is coming when no one can work. That is more likely pointing to Revelation, I would assume, rather than just the time without Christ, because Jesus does later talk about us getting the Holy Spirit to help us. I don't have a ton to add there.
That looks pretty much like what it's saying here. The night is coming is referencing his crucifixion. And there was literally darkness. It's recorded historically in Roman times, actually, during that. That was a scary place to be on that day.
I can imagine.
I cannot. So, yeah, I just wanted, in case, if I'm following along the Bible, I'm like, hey, I got a question. What the heck are you talking about there?
Yeah.
Those are the things that when I used to first read the Bible would just knock me back and it would get me stuck. And I'd be looking at this little tiny sentence instead of looking at the bigger picture.
I think that's good. I think it's good to raise those questions. That's kind of what we're doing here, right? Is just trying to talk through it. I think it's good to raise questions. Not every question needs an elaborate, long answer. It can just be, yeah, he's what it was here.
Right, 100%.
Yeah, ironically, it is funny. It feels like every chapter is getting to feel very similar because it's Jesus does a miracle.
Yeah. Well, this does seem to me like a file cabinet of stories in a certain contextual and historical era. And you open up the file cabinet, you pull out that folder, and hey, look, here's another report. Here's another report. Here's another thing that happened. And I think they're putting these together, saying, hey, this is a good way to bind these all together. We're going to tell a bunch of stories about this time, these events, this man that was here, the Son of God, and what he's doing. And they're going to be similar, too, because you have the same government. You have the same people going against him. You have the same people concerned for their rule or their position of authority, and they're all panicking.
That's the most tragic thing, I think, as we keep reading these stories, is just how, whether it's pride or maybe even fear, it could be fear, I don't know. It's so hard for me to put myself in the shoes of a Jewish person specifically, because one, we believe in Christ. So you and I were Christians. We would say we're Christians. So already our assumption is we're reading this book as people who believe this is the Messiah. And it's such a contrast because I don't want to say pity, but when you look at Jewish people now, you can't help but feel bad for them because that they missed it. The Messiah that they have been waiting for, the one who was sent first for them, but then for everyone, they missed it. And not only that, we see it here, they want to kill him. They reject his teachings. And of course, they would feel the same for us. Like, they would pity us because they think we are worshiping a false prophet. It's one of those things that is hard to reconcile. They are the chosen people of God in the Old Testament. They were the nation, the physical nation that God had.
You referenced one of the last chapters, I think in chapter 5, what a tragedy it was that the very people that he came for were the ones that put him to death and killed him and rejected him and all this. And I think that's a continuing part of that tragedy, that they waited for him all these years, centuries and centuries they waited. Yeah. And here he is. And not only are you not going to accept him, but you're going to turn it the other way around.
It's nice to get the context in this chapter from the blind man. This conversation could just as easily have been Jesus and the Pharisees. Everything the blind man says, for the most part, could have just been Jesus. They could have gone straight to him. But to see it from the perspective of essentially a lay person, just the person who was healed, I think is very powerful. The reason you go to the Pharisees, we'll see this later. Jesus heals a leper. I don't know which gospel it's in off the top of my head. I assume it's in John. And part of what he says is go to the Pharisee, because you have to go for them to record, especially with leprosy. You go and they record that you were healed, and that because then that allows you to reintegrate to society.
Yeah, because you're cast out.
Yeah. So now obviously it's a little different when you're blind. You're not cast out of society because you are contagious to other people. You're cast out of society because, especially back then, there's just no such thing as handicap accommodations, right? Back in these days. The only accommodation is that they let you beg instead of just killing you. That was kind of the accommodation you got back then. So he does go. He's clearly a Jewish person, I think. I think that's kind of the implication. So he goes to the Pharisees. He goes to the temple to worship, and they're asking you obviously everybody who recognizes him is probably making a big stink about it. So he just says, he tells them what Jesus did. And their first response, and again, this just shows how twisted they were by the law. And this is why when we talk about how Paul writes about the law in not his Gospels, in his books, his letters, he makes a big point to lay out why the law can only condemn. And we see it right here, because the law just tells you why what you did was a sin. It details sin, but it only can detail it. It can't free you from it. And Jesus, in a later chapter, will talk about how Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. But that's their immediate response. This man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. They can't even comprehend that Jesus would be willing to heal us on the Sabbath, or that God would be willing to heal.
Pick anything that's current and relate it back to this modern day, any controversial topic. They kind of lay out here the interesting thing that about this story, and you're talking about it right now, is a few things that you always see, and one is willful unbelief. Mm-hmm. They have all this evidence in front of them, and they purposely ignore all of it. So you have willful unbelief, and then unbelief always wants more evidence and never has enough. So no matter what you show them, no matter how many people, because they go and talk to his parents, it doesn't matter what the parents say. It doesn't matter if they had video back then of the kid born blind. They would have found something wrong. They would have said they photoshopped it. Whatever it is, there's a way you can deny anybody that you don't want to believe. And it just goes on, and it describes people we know, leaders we know. It describes what was happening back then with the Pharisees, and I believe it describes human nature.
Because you can take that to its conclusion, and it actually does get taken to its conclusion. In one of Jesus' parables, he talks about Lazarus, and Lazarus dies and goes to hell. And while he's down there, Jesus comes and talks to him, or I might be messing this up a little bit, but the core point is all he wants to do is go warn his family. That's what he says. Let me go tell my family so that they won't show up here. And he's told explicitly, they would not believe you even if you appeared before them and told them. And I do like to say this. I'm sure there's one person out there who will disagree with me, but you cannot logically enter into faith. No amount of logic. There is never enough logical, objective proof for you to enter into faith. Crazy as that might sound. I know there's somebody out there like, well, what if Jesus just opened the clouds and stuck his head down and said, I am Jesus? One, no. Well, it already happened, but he came as a man. He didn't come as a whatever. But we even see that in Revelation. In Revelation, Jesus will rule over this earth while there are still sinners alive, and they will war against him, it says in Revelation. So that I don't believe you that would be enough for you. Your heart is hardened. That is the core point. No amount of logical facts are going to soften your heart. The only thing that can soften your heart is the Spirit of God, which you're not going to like this if you fall into this category, but the Spirit of God is touching you and impacting you every day and trying to soften your heart. It's not working because you have a hard heart, and that is a you problem. That is not a Jesus problem. And it's exactly what's happening here. Their hearts are hard. I mean, you talk about human nature. It is human nature. Look at anything. We see it. They're faced with it. They're faced with reality. What is their response?
Their response is to kick them out of the synagogue.
Well, it's anger, right? And that's kind of what I was building to. It's not. They're not sad. They're not self-reflective. They're not repentant. They're angry, and then they kill him. That's the ultimate end here. And you see that. We see that happening all around in everything. It's not even religious things. We see it politically. We see it socially. You see videos of these kids like beating the crap out of each other in schools. Why is that? I don't know that that's a perfect example, but...
Well, it's also interesting, too, that as far as historically, this gentleman here is the first known person to get kicked out of the synagogue because he's following Christ. He's telling them, and he's giving a hard time about it, which I think is hilarious. And that creates a rift between some of the people that are following Christ and the Pharisees, and I think that starts to widen what's already starting to go on here.
Well, and it has to, because you either, like we're talking about, we see that clearly happen in verse 32. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. So this is what we're talking about, of this irrefutable proof. You're a Pharisee. You and I are Pharisees. This guy comes in. We know he's blind. Now he can see. So we can either say, holy cow, this person who healed him must be the real deal. There's no other explanation. Or we can get angry because it attacks our pride, because it's playing out maybe in a way we wouldn't understand, and say, oh, well, he shouldn't have healed you on the Sabbath. He must be a sinner. And in my pride, I'm not a sinner. And we see them saying that towards the end of the chapter. I'm perfect. I'm pure because I'm a Pharisee.
It even looks like they're getting ready to kick his parents out.
They're going to kick everybody out. His parents won't even tell the truth. So
Look how careful they are with their answers.
Well, and you talk about a rift. This is already happening. Jesus already has enough of a following. Imagine that you couldn't go to church and talk about Jesus. Now, I know this is a little different, but it would be like if Revelation started happening. And I mean happening in earnest, not these people who tell you the rapture is going to happen tomorrow or whatever. But like in earnest, Revelation started, and we, without a doubt, knew it. And like every Christian on the planet, oh, clearly. And then we go to church and we start talking about it, and they're like, you can't talk about that. What are you doing? Get out of here. And that will happen in some churches, I'm sure.
It happens in some countries right now. They go into the churches and just wipe every Christian out.
No, but I'm talking about like the church pastor, right? If we go, like you go to church and you're like, pastor, oh my gosh, the revelation is happening. And then he says, no, it's not. Clearly it's not. There's not enough signs, or there's not enough this or whatever. That's going to happen because those same people, Revelation talks about that, where people will be turned, they missed it. And there's always that risk. And it's just this gets to Jesus talking about the wheat and the tares. You have to just let the wheat grow, and at harvest time is where you separate it. And unfortunately, that means we have a lot of potential people who claim to be Christian who will not ultimately go to the Father, who won't know him. He won't know them when he goes to see them. But it's going to play out exactly like it's playing out here. The fact that you can't talk about the literal Messiah for fear of persecution from your church leaders is tough. But to act like it doesn't happen with obviously much less high-stakes things.
It almost reminds you of like World War II days. I mean, they go up there, the whole family. This kid's family is they're getting ready to kick them right out. And they're like, he can talk for himself. They're scared to death to get excommunicated. We don't know what happens with them. It doesn't say, but I'm imagining it wasn't good.
I mean, they're not going to kill them, but it's not fun.
Back then, it wasn't like you get kicked out of your church and just go to another one. It was different there. That was the only.
There's one temple.
Right.
But again, to act like we don't see this today, go to your circle of friends, go to your church group, and tell them you vote Republican or you vote Democrat. And half of them, whoever votes the other, oh, you're not friends anymore.
Yeah, that's sad.
Or whatever else. I mean, it doesn't even have to be that advanced. It could be...
Well, it can be just an issue, too.
It could be like a different sports team. Like, I like these guys, you like those guys, and now we can't be friends. There's so much...
Pick any hot-button topic and...
Right, because... And this is the problem. This is the problem. We see it with the Pharisees, and we see it played out all the time. The Pharisees built their identity around being a Pharisee, and now that is getting challenged. When it gets challenged by the truth is where it's a problem. I think I already used a similar example, but if Joe Schmo comes up to me on the street and says, you're a bad person, I just say, thank you, have a nice day, and I keep walking. It does not impact me. If my mother gave me a call, like stood me aside and said, hey, listen, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? You shouldn't be doing that. You should be living like this. Now I'm going to get angry, or I'm going to be repentant. I'm being confronted with actual truth from a source, as pure of a source as you can. If your mom is telling you you're a bad person, you must be one of the worst people on the planet. What mother would tell their kid that?
Right.
Even if you are genuinely the worst person, 9 times out of 10, I think your mother would say you're great because they love you. It's that love. This, you can never be a disappointment. You can never this, whatever. And I know that's not as good of an example, but these people are being confronted by the pure holiness of God, and it's shining that light. And so you have two choices. You can either repent or you get mad. You get hugely mad, and we see that. And that's the problem. So for everybody listening, when you get mad, anger, I'm not a therapist. You're angry because you're feeling something else, and you don't want to deal with or process that, so you get angry. And that is what's happening. And I think that's what happens a lot in even non-religious, in some of these examples that we're talking about, because it challenges your core identity. It challenges your core beliefs. Who you see yourself as is now being challenged. And what more challenging message is there than Christ, which says you are an unrighteous, degenerate sinner? And that is a challenge.
Add on top of that the fact that your career's going away, your income's going away, you're suspecting this, you're panicking.
Possibly they felt that. There was fear.
They didn't have side jobs. They weren't running.
Yeah.
They weren't in charge and running the show. They weren't eating. Layer that on top of everything else, and it gives them even more reason.
Well, even if that wasn't going to change, it's their station. Their people are viewing them less. They're seeing it that way, I assume. That, they're not going to respect us as much, whatever it is. So all that to say, this is a roundabout way of saying, their anger makes sense because that is kind of the natural response of the hardened heart, because that you're essentially reacting poorly to the presence of the Spirit of God. And further to say, these guys are not special. We all have a tendency to react that way when we're challenged with truth.
That's just my favorite in the whole thing. It's chapter 24. So they're saying to him, hey, we're telling you this guy's a sinner. And the guy's like, well, I don't know if he's a sinner or not. All I'm telling you is I couldn't see this morning, and now I can see. Mm-hmm. And so he's really being smart, which I love. And then they're like, what did he do? And he's like, I already told you what he did. What's the matter with you? And then they get off on the different tack. You're his disciple. You're one of his disciples. We're Moses' disciples. We don't listen to Moses. And then he gives the most brilliant response ever. This is a great thing. You don't know where he's from, yet he's opened my eyes. Because this is amazing. Okay, this is going on. You guys have no clue. If this guy wasn't God, this wouldn't have happened. Most basic thing in the world, he's telling them.
Not only that, if you look at verse 31, now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears them. That is such a brutal call out of these Pharisees. I'm genuinely shocked that some blind beggar dude, right, is the one delivering, because that's something Jesus would say.
Right, and look where he came from. I mean, this guy, you were blind. You weren't getting educated and learning trades and stuff like that. You were sitting somewhere begging. He has the wherewithal to say this, but what wisdom.
And it's echoed by Jesus literally later in verse 41, because he says, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains.
The study guide says the same thing. It says, he demonstrated more spiritual insight and common sense than all combined. His penetrating wit focused in on their intractable unbelief. His logic was it was so extraordinary that it could only indicate that Jesus was from God. And that's what everyone's saying. And I don't know anybody anywhere that could watch that happen.
And it's not just once. This is happening every time he comes in contact with somebody.
I think that's also contributing to the Pharisees' panic, is that this is starting to cascade. And that they know they're losing control.
But good, and that's the problem.
If you were truly a Pharisee for the right reasons, you would be rejoicing.
And I think that's why you have this division, because, they're fighting that natural urge of their flesh and saying, but this probably is the Messiah, right? Like, this has to be the Messiah.
Some of them are psyched. Some of them are like, this is great. He's here. I can't believe it. He gets to be here. We're here.
And again, that's why it's so hard, because I sympathize. I absolutely sympathize, because Jesus is not the first false prophet in their eyes. Jesus obviously is not a false prophet, for the record, okay, but they're calling him a false prophet. This is not their first rodeo. This is probably their 10th rodeo. I can sympathize with that almost hopelessness of why is this time going to be different? Surely this is just another false prophet. Yeah, verse 41 is just so clear, because it sounds very counterintuitive. If you were blind, you would have no sin. What does that even mean? But you say, we see. But he's talking about the pride. What do you see? You don't have eyes to see. It's kind of the difference between like knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge just means you know things, but wisdom means you can actually reason through it.
And that's how he always spoke in the parables and the, what I call the metaphor. That is the most powerful. And you could use that today for anything. You got eyes, but you can see nothing. And how many people in any walk of life experience that? The most educated, the most religious, the most everything, and it's right there in front of the forest through the trees, right. Those types of sayings. And here's a great example of that. And Jesus is telling him, if you were blind, you'd be okay.
Well, but, and that's kind of the point he's making. If you're blind, you need help. I can't see, especially back then. I can't see. I'm screwed. I can't do anything. And so you realize the need that you have for Christ. And he's not saying you have no sin because you're special, but he's saying because I am going to heal you, right? I will pay the sin for you. But if you think you can see, then you don't need God. You don't think you need Christ. It's such a good illustration of the need for Christ. We are blind. We are everything. We're deaf, dumb, blind. We don't have any legs. We're everything. We're everything that could be wrong with us. We're so wicked and unrighteous. Thank God we didn't have the hardness of heart to not say, therefore I need Jesus. That's it. That's literally it. That's the only difference is the Pharisees said, no, we don't need you. In fact, you are bad. And this blind guy said, absolutely, I need you.
It's interesting to me how if it was somebody like me and just being ignorant and stupid, and somebody told you, hey, your job is going to be go and heal all these people and help everybody and save the world and okay, go. You'd be so excited on the way to here, and then you get there and you'd be so blown away that everybody's mad at you. When all you're doing is, what have you done? You've hurt no one. You've done nothing but save this, help that. and all these people were mad. It'd just be blown away. Now, obviously, Jesus knows everything that's coming, but a dummy like me would get in there, and I would be just knocked over.
Yeah. No, it's awful.
We're here to save you guys. Are you nuts? I'd be getting mad.
Yeah.
I'd be getting real mad.
Yes. I don't really have anything else to say.
I got nothing to add to it.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me that it goes like this, and like you said, it keeps cycling through. We know it comes to an end, and we know where it's all going, but to really dig into these stories and really learn about them and really try and think, of the perceptions of everyone, to include Jesus. I always wonder about that. How are you sitting down there in the body of a man dealing with all this nonsense? It's just, wow. And there's no amount of thanks that we can ever give that would even put a dent in what he went through. And this is just the stuff he's going through that will drive me crazy right now. It gets so much worse.
Yeah, it's definitely going to get worse for Jesus. Definitely continuing to be worse for the Pharisees. That's just kind of the reality of things. But I don't know that we need to over-belabor the point. Is there anything else? Any other thoughts you had?
No, it's a very short chapter. It's pretty explanatory, I think. It's a good one to read because it's not bogged down in a bunch of confusing facts and stuff. It's a story, and everyone can relate and understand what's going on, and gets to me with its humor. Just I like the blind guy.
I'm really glad, like I was saying, it's nice to see not Jesus kind of rebuke the Pharisees. I think that's good, and I think because you need to have that courage.
That's a big deal. Think that courage too. I got kicked out of my church. It's not the same thing.
Oh no, and you see it.
Excommunication was it could mean the end of your whole world.
Beyond the social side of it, you get people who think if you're attacking their leaders, that's gonna piss them off.
Well, if you're a merchant and you're excommunicated, not a single person living in that town is buying one more thing from you ever. You are done.
They're not talking to you.
You'll have to leave.
They might kill you. It's so much deeper than that. But it needs to be done. And we even see that in the church. Paul writes about that, how you got to get, if these people are living in sin, you have to get them out. And leaders that are living in sin, you got to call that out. You have to excise that as soon as you can.
I remember when some of the, back in the late 80s, a couple big ones were falling. And I had some people that were close to me that were extremely devoted to that exact church. And one was a real good friend of mine, and it was real painful to watch what he was going through. He put his faith, obviously, in a person instead of God, which is easy to do. I'm not casting judgment at all. Boy, when you're in a position of authority like that, you have a massive responsibility that is, to me, terrorized me, that to not mislead anybody, because I don't want to go up and answer to God, and, hey, we're explaining my stuff here, and you did it backwards, and you did it to benefit yourself. I would not want to be that guy.
No, and I think too, we see that more often than not, as we talked about, I'm sure there were good Pharisees. There was this divide, but it's more common than you think that you can't handle the position because you're going to be pride. You're going to do what these guys did. You're going to do what people still do. And I think that's the biggest potential stumbling block for people when we read the Bible is not seeing how what we're reading still happens today. Because it is eternal. The human condition is eternal. Sure, we maybe don't have Pharisees, but we do have bad church leaders, right? We just have bad people. We have people. And no matter what, you're always going to deal with these kinds of problems. So it's important to not just read these stories as what they were, which is a retelling of a historical event, but also we should see it. The blind man who does suddenly see should be able to call out Pharisees if they exist. And we should have that courage. So it's more than just a story in the Old Testament. I think it is still guide. I don't know what the right word is, but it's still as applicable today.
I like to take one positive that I can from each thing, and it's that guy's character, that blind guy. I mean, he's get this great gift from Jesus, and what's he do? He stands up.
Yeah, and he doesn't even know. Like it says in the chapter, Jesus asks him.
He's asking him, who are you?
Verse 35, Jesus says, do you believe in the Son of God? He answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? Doesn't even know, and yet you can acknowledge it. And this is what's so funny to me, where it gets back to what you were talking about with the proof. You know the Son of God. He maybe didn't title himself that, but much like this blind guy, he met the Son of God, and he knew it without knowing it, because you just know it. And then he says, you have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. So Jesus says, it's me. Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. He had that belief before Jesus said, I'm the Son of God. As always, shocking. A Bible chapter is great. I love it. I love the Bible. Every time you read it, you can learn something about yourself. You can learn something about the world and others. And there's just so much here. And even though this is essentially the fourth chapter in a row of the same thing happening, still can take away different things because there's always just a little bit more, or a little bit different that helps us. So hopefully this helped you as well. If you're listening, leave a comment. Are you blind or can you see? And I don't know. We got to find out good ways to interact with the audience. We pretty much ignore them for all of our episodes. We'll figure something out. Yeah, maybe somebody leave a comment and then we'll start talking to you. How about that? This ain't a one-way street. Now we've got to become the Pharisees and berate everybody who doesn't comment. Leave a comment.
All right, everybody have a safe and healthy week.
And keep it simple.